The simplicity of this is astounding. In all the wire wrapping that I've done for years, I really can't think of anything more cost-effective, more easy, just more all-around versatile than this one simple ring. And I've done a couple versions of it in videos, but I think I've really kind of tweaked the final edges of getting it just right. So you basically just need 18 gauge, one piece, literally 12 inches to make the simple version. If you want to do a complex version, you can go 18 to 20 inches. But we're talking about, like, at the very most, 1/2 of a meter for people in meter land. And then one 6mm bead. That's it. You could do, it's fun to do these with 4mm. It's fun to do them with 8mm. You can do a whole bunch of different little beads or stones or chips. It's a million varieties, but this is the fastest, the simplest. Just one 6mm bead or stone. This is called African Turquoise. It's actually a blue-green dyed jasper, but really pretty. This particular color is called vintage bronze or antique brass, depending on the manufacturer, but it's like basically a tarnished brass look. It's kind of a brownish yellow, really cool earth tone. Anyway, the variation really comes down to, you're going to put the stone in the middle and you're going to wrap it about once or twice around and then bring the ends together. And then at this point, you can do crazy swirls right away. And then you can wrap it around the ring mandrel and finish it off. Or you can wrap it around the ring mandrel, then do your crazy swirls. Or you could do both. But at some point, you're going to make sure that you wrap one or both of the wires around the part that makes the ring to lock it all in. And then with your end, I used to take the end and tuck it underneath and put a little dab of E6000 or some kind of glue. Now I'm just taking the end, and no matter where it ends up, I just coil it into a coil and then shove the coil somewhere else as an extra little decoration. As long as it's, you know, shoved in somewhere where it's not going to stick up and snag. So basically there's just endless patterns that you can do. If you're looking at, like, from a bird's eye view, you could big swirl, big loops, little loops, like a whole little section of loops that look like flower petals or leaves. You can come around the ring in a big looping arch. You could make a heart if you want. There's just so much you could do. And each one you should just experiment and have fun with it. So I'm going to make one right now. Bring it to the middle of the wire. I like to be real stickler with getting this part tight. It might be hard with 18 gauge, and this can be done with 20 also, like training wheels, until you really feel confident. But I feel like 20 gauge really doesn't make a strong ring. It could get smushed really easily. 18 gauge could get smushed too if someone steps on it, but it's a significantly firmer. Anyway, at this point, I like to really pull it in tight around the stone. Give it a little muscle there, so it's as tight as you can get. And then start wrapping these around. About once around is good. I bring them together, maybe 1.5 times, and then I straighten it out so it's coming like from a right angle, right from the stone or bead. And then I get my ring mandrel. Now you don't need a ring mandrel. You can get a big fat magic marker, and a lot of markers will be the same size as a lot of very common finger sizes. So if you get a big fat highlighter or an extra fat marker, you'll probably be good. Skinny marker is not going to work unless you're making these rings for elves. But in the past, I said get a stepped mandrel because the entire size is even all the way across. But it really doesn't matter. Like, just get any mandrel. You'll be fine. So you see my numbers keep wearing off. I keep writing them in Sharpie, and they keep wearing off again. Anyway, 7 is pretty much the most common size, 6 and 7. So I wrap it around as tight as I can. And I also make sure the stone is flat. The stone might come up, and I flatten it, try to make it sticking up evenly as much as possible. And I usually come around to the opposite side because that gives like a cool effect. And I'm just pressing it tight as I come around all the way so I get a nice round circle. And then I wrap around the bead or stone once, and that locks everything in place. Now, if you're a stickler about having the wires side by side a certain way, then you can, you know, be very careful with them, or you can just go quick and just wrap it. But that's it. That's a ring right there. That's ready to go on a finger. You pretty much just need to get these guys tucked in somewhere. At some point, we're going to wrap them through the ring just to lock it in a little bit more. But at this point, you have all this extra wire, you can really play. And when I say play, it's going to be a workout on your fingers with 18 gauge when you first get started, but that's why I said you might want to practice with 20 gauge. But basically, I'm just making these loops, and I roll them in tighter and tighter, because the tighter they are, the better they look. But every once in a while, I let myself make a nice big one. And there's different patterns. There's little, big, little. There's gradually getting bigger. It's whatever you want. Or you can just start messing around and see where the wire takes you. It's all fun. So this is turning into like little, big, little. Now always be aware of how much wire you have left. Like when you start getting down to an inch or two, you need to end it, because you're going to need a little bit of wire to finish it off. So this is good. I could still play some more, but I just want to show you a simple version. So at this point, I'm just going to bring these around here, and I'm going to go once around through the ring part to really lock it in. Now, the easiest way is to make like a nice curve with your finger like this and feed it through this way. And try your best, hold everything in place, because stuff will try to wonk all over the place. Try to hold everything still until you get this through. And then I try to get it as tight as I can, right like that. And then at various times, stuff moves around. I'll put it back on the mandrel as many times as I need and push everything back where I want it to be. Sometimes I use my fingers, sometimes I use the pliers. Sometimes I'll just use the edge of, like, the side of the pliers. Sometimes there's all kinds of things. Like this, I don't like how the stone moved away from those circles a little bit. Let me see if I can get it back. When I push it back, that moves. So now I'm going to press all together. It's a lot of pressure, putting a lot of pressure in different places all at the same time, squeezing it. It's like molding it almost. Now see these loops? They're sticking out a little bit. I want them pressed a little tighter, because I also want everything to take the shape of a ring. I don't want anything sticking out like airplane wings. I want everything as flat as possible against the finger so it looks elegant and it doesn't cause a situation where it catches and snags on everything. So I'm always pressing to make all my designs tight in the shape of the circle of the ring. And sometimes your fingers aren't strong enough. Sometimes you can roll it against the table like this. Sometimes I will take the pliers and carefully, if there's certain parts sticking up that bother me, I'll put the pliers together and just poke and push pressure down like that. You gotta be careful though, because you could slip, you could scratch the wire, you could stab yourself, you could scratch yourself. But other times I use my finger. I'll use whatever is available. There's no right or wrong. So now I take this off. Still want that a little closer. And I think I'm done. I'm going to make each of these into a swirl. Now I could take one and wrap it around here, come around there, so I have a swirl on each side. Or I can stack the swirls, make a big swirl and then a little swirl. I think I'm going to do that. I like that idea. Stack the swirl. So this one, being aware of how big of a swirl I want. This one I'm going to cut it, maybe a little bit more. So that's a good swirl. And this one I'm going to cut, I want a smaller swirl. Again, maybe a tiny bit more. Don't go too small. If you go too small, it's hard to even make a swirl. You'll end up just making a loop, which, if you're stuck, is not the end of the world. It's better to have at least the loop will hide the sharp the sharp end a little bit. Because ultimately, these sharp guys, you want them tucked somewhere. So this, I start the very end and I make a hook. Come on, camera, focus. Make a little teeny tiny hook. I roll as far as I can, and then I take the pliers out. And I carefully, holding it tight, carefully pinch it down, because it's easy to slip at this point. So you go carefully, make sure you're very confident. If you feel like it's going to slip, reposition. Go real slow until you pinch it down like that. Squeeze it like that, make sure it's flat. And then there's some little rubbish. And then grab it like this and roll it a second time. Pinch it again. Again, careful, you're not going to slip. Squeeze it flat. Now by this time you're starting to get more surface area. So grab it about medium way down. Make sure you're not getting near these. See, mine have cutters at the back. You don't want to touch it with that. But somewhere right in here, grab it. And this is where you want to be really firm. Because if you're not firm, you're going to slip and scratch the wire. Very firm. And then roll. You can roll the pliers, or you can just roll the wire into it. Just little amounts. Squeeze, roll, let go. Squeeze, roll. And if it's not getting tight, again, you can always come back this way. And you can carefully pinch it together if you want a tight swirl. And you can have a loose swirl. You can have a big swirl with, a space in between. It's all up to you. Now I have more surface area to grab. It should be easier. Grab, roll. Grab, roll. Grab, roll. And I'm not grabbing it all the way down here. I'm grabbing it on the edge, kind of the back half of it, so it has room to roll. grab, roll, grab, roll. Now this is a big swirl. I usually don't like them this big because I'm always thinking about trying to make things not snaggable. But it's pretty strong wire, it's pretty firm, and if I lay it flat right there, it's probably going to stay there and not going to get yanked out of place very easily. So I'm going to do the same thing with this guy. See that? I went too fast and I slipped a little bit. I didn't scratch it, but I could have. Let's go slow. Slow. See, I almost slipped again. Whoop. Got too carried away. I was showing off how I could do it super fast. And next thing I knew, I started to slip. Now this, see, I would have liked this swirl to be even smaller so you could really see the difference. And it's a risk that you might get the wire, see the wire gets a little wonky when you unroll it, but if you roll it tight enough again, you can redo your swirl, and it's a risk that's not, it's not the most terrible risk in the world. So I'm going to cut off more, maybe even a little bit more, because I actually want a smaller swirl. Start right there. And put that swirl on top of the swirl. And see, I have teeny tiny little marks from the pliers. Most people aren't going to notice that, especially the people you give it to that don't make jewelry. You're going to notice your mistakes more than anyone. As long as you're not actually scratching off part of the coating, because most of this craft wire is coated. Underneath is bare copper. And if you expose the bare copper, it looks very bright, and it will look significantly like there's something damaged about it. This camera's moving on me. But there you go. You see how quickly we did that? And that was with me explaining it. If I didn't explain it, I could have done it like even faster, also because I'm like amazing. But this has a little bit of a space in this circle here. That's okay. Really, there's no right or wrong. Lastly, always put it back on the mandrel one more time, because it'll change shape, it'll change size as you're messing with it. And if you want to get it back to the size you want, press, press, press. Get that. Look at it from all angles. Make sure. Sometimes the stone will pop up too high. I'll grab the edge of the wire around the stone and just press it like that. And then I have to press the other side, and then press the other. Sometimes I make it worse by doing that, but don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to try everything, because the more you mess up, the more you'll understand what your boundaries are. So messing up is really just learning. You want to do it the wrong way on every possible side, so you know where your boundaries are. Because sometimes you think it's the wrong way and it's really not, and you learn a whole new thing. So always experiment. So anyway, there's one ring. I'll do a super extravagant one just to show you how crazy you can get. Now again, all you need to do is wrap the stone once, and you have a simple ring that a lot of people just prefer a simple. But just for the fun of the video, let's just do a really crazy one.